When Mike asked me to do today's forum, I said to him, why? And he said, because I think you have a story to tell. And I said, well, I do have a story, and most of you don't know all of my story. You'll get most of it today. But what I want to do is start with a reading from Langston Hughes, because this really does tell my story in such a wonderful way. It's the mother to son. She says, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places where no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on those steps, 'cause you finds it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going on, honey. I's still climbing, for life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So I started in Florida with my parents. I was born in the Bahamas, and we relocated to the United States when I was 3 years old. And I remember going to the Episcopal Church in Hollywood. His name was St. Andrew's. I've been an Episcopalian all of my life, well, most of my life. I did leave in between for maybe a year. And I remember at my church, there were several things that I couldn't be. I couldn't be an acolyte. And because I didn't sing soprano, I couldn't sing with the girls section of my choir. And my rector said, you can't sing with the boys. So I said, okay, well then I won't sing with y'all. And I left. I left that choir. I left that church for about a year, decided that perhaps my sister's church was very different. She was Episcopalian turned Pentecostal. So I went to her church thinking that they had a deeper respect for girls and women, only to find that they did not. And I went hurrying back to the Episcopal Church. Because one of my teachers in high school said, Miller, my maiden name is Miller, he said, Miller, you can't change things from the outside as fast as you can change things from the inside. You need to go back. And I did. Didn't have an inkling that my life was going to take the turns that it did, and I would wind up in Durham, North Carolina. But before I got there, I met my daughter's father, and we got married, and I found him abusive. He was physically abusive. And I thought to myself, I could stay in this marriage. I love this man so much, I could stay in this marriage, until I saw him spank her one day. And I made the decision, you can put your hands on me, but you can't put your hands on my child. And I left him in the stealth of night. I packed all of my earthly belongings in a U-Haul, called my brother and said, you need to come and drive me to North Carolina. And we did. And when I got to North Carolina, I had no idea that God was already gone, had already gone before me. I ended up in this little church called St. Titus. Now, St. Titus is very special for two reasons, because of things that happened to me in my life. One, I couldn't be an acolyte. And Dr. Cecil Patterson at St. Titus was the first person in the nation to make girls acolytes. And he was from St. Titus. And let me tell you what happened. Dr. Patterson used, as all acolyte coordinators, only had boys as acolytes. But it was during the Vietnam-era war, and he had no boys. They were all sent off to the war because they were just taking, I lost cousins, I lost friends during that war because most of the people there were black. They took the black young men and sent them off to war. And for Dr. Patterson, it devastated his ability to do church. So he appointed girls. And at that time, they were sending the names into the national church. So the gentleman who received the names called Dr. Patterson and said, Cecil, there must be something wrong here. And he said, what do you mean? He said, well, these are girls' names like Julia and Susan and Mary. He said, only boys can be acolytes. And Dr. Patterson said, not in my church. He said, I don't have any boys. He said, all of my boys have gone off to war. All I have are girls, and I must do church, so the girls are going to be acolytes. And he started the pattern. It didn't become official until 1980, but it was Dr. Patterson who first made girls acolytes at this little church in Durham, North Carolina, St. Titus. Now, the other thing about St. Titus that many of you may not know is that the first African-American female priest was from St. Titus. Her name was Pauli Murray. And Pauli Murray wrote a book called Proud Shoes. And in her book, she talks about how her family started St. Titus Church. So here I was at St. Titus, not knowing any of this history until I actually was in an ordination process, that God had already gone before me to clear that path. God had already made the decision that I will be with you always, even until the end of the world. And therefore, I want you to become a priest. Now, many of you do know that I came kicking and screaming to the process. And I did say to God, oh yeah, you want me to be a priest? You'll have to make it happen, because I ain't doing nothing. I'm just going to be a bump on a log. And God said, really? You want to challenge me? Okay, I'll take you on. So I ended up being in a process. And I said to my first committee that I spoke with, why are you here? I said, well, I don't like to preach. I don't like to get before people. I don't like to do this. I don't like, and they said, well, why are you here? And I said, I don't know. And they put me through. I said, what's wrong with you people? And then I get to I go before the next committee, and they asked me the question. They said, what makes you angry? And I realized for the first time why I probably was on this journey, because I said to them, racism makes me angry. I said, I can't handle racism. I said, I look around this room and all of you are white. I said, why aren't there any black people on this committee? Racism makes me angry. You need to do something about that. I thought I'd blown my chance with them too. Well, they put me through. And I'm like, okay. So finally, I was at a point in my journey where I was to be ordained, and this little church, St. Titus, the little church that sponsored me to the process, ordained me. And I will tell you, when I got before the bishop and he said, will you obey your bishop? I said, well, that depends. And the whole church did exactly what you did. They cracked up. And Bishop Johnson, bless his heart, turned red. But he ordained me. And I was like, oh, okay. Now, in between my being sponsored, my going to the committees and being ordained, I went to a school in Connecticut. And while I was there, oh my God, I thought that they were going to put me out of school because I just didn't take any nonsense. There were things that we were doing, and I said, well, why did you have this? And why did you have that? And what's wrong with this? And what's wrong with that? And they said things like, well, why don't you do something about it? And I said, okay, fine. I will be on the committee that plans services for our aspect of this divinity school. And I will be on the committee that is a part of the bigger divinity school. And I will do this and I will do that because you don't have enough people who look like me. And that's how, when we were at the end of our time and doing graduation, that's how Yale said, we have an award for you. And that award is because of all the things that you did, and you didn't just sit back. You kept climbing, and we appreciate that in you, Zelda Kennedy. I was shocked, but I accepted the award because it was monetary. I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So I don't often talk about Yale, but that was an experience for me. It was an amazing experience. And I'm grateful that God was before me and took care of that too. So I was ordained at St. Titus, and I met this gentleman named Brian. And Brian Sunken was the rector of a church in Mooresville, North Carolina. And he said to me, would you be interested in coming to my church? And I said, well, what is your church? St. Patrick's. I said, why do you want me to come? He said, well, I think you're going to like it there. So I went and I interviewed with everyone. It was an all-white church. There were no blacks. And I said to him, Brian, you don't have any black people in this church. And he said, I know. He said, but Zelda, I think you'll make a difference. So if you're interested, we would like to hire you. And I learned later that a member of the committee, the search committee that was looking at me said, what is she going to do for socialization? There are no black people in our church. And Brian said, she's smart, she'll find a way. And sure enough, by the time I left St. Patrick's, we were diverse. And I was so grateful for that. I know, again, that God had gone before me to clear the path. And St. Patrick was very much like All Saints, very much like All Saints. We were the first church in North Carolina to marry a same-gender couple. Nobody was willing to take that risk, but we did. We were the first church in the Diocese of North Carolina to do many, many things. And as a result, our bishop, Michael Curry, was always worshiping with us because he said, you're the most progressive church in my diocese, and I want other churches to know that, to follow your example. So now the Diocese of North Carolina is pretty diverse. They still have challenges though, but they're pretty diverse. And Michael, of course, you know, is the presiding bishop. I tried to get him to All Saints my first and second year, and it took 10. Because he's one of the best preachers in the Anglican Communion, and his calendar was that far out. It took us 10 years to get him here. And then he turned around and became presiding bishop. I said, what were you thinking? He said, I don't know. He said, my wife says the same thing. But he's amazing, and I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to be there when he was ordained, and to be there when he was bishop of our diocese. And then I came here. But you know how I got here? I saw Ed. He came to do a workshop for us on sexuality. And he asked a really dumb question. And I said to him, you know, that question is loaded. I said, for several reasons. I said, but the most important reason is that black people don't think that way. And he looked at me, and he was like, okay. And I said, this is the way we think, and this is the way we feel. And I'm not representing all of the black people in the world. I'm just representing me. And this is how I want to respond to that question that you just asked. And then I walked out of the room. And then later on that day, my dean came to me and said, Ed Bacon would like to interview you. And I said, what? Why? And he said, he would like to interview you. I said, okay. So I said no. And that evening I came downstairs to prepare the room for our evening service, and Ed Bacon was in our waiting room waiting on a taxi to take him over to New York City. And he scared the living daylights out of me because generally no one is in that area. So we talked for a few minutes, and then my dean came back again and he said, Ed Bacon would really like to interview you. And I said, why? I said, you know, I suspected that he was looking for people to come to his church when I noticed all of my colleagues lining up to see him. I said, but no one told me that Ed was coming to interview seminarians for possible openings at his church. I said, and I am the head house resident. I should have known that. No, he cannot interview me. And finally, through a lot of coaxing, I said yes. And I'm glad that I did. Even though when Ed followed up with my interview and said, are you coming to All Saints? I said, well, I don't think so. I said, this church, this mission, it was a mission, this mission in North Carolina wants to hire me. And he said the right words. He said, my sister, he said, we would love to have you at All Saints. However, if your heart tells you that this is where you need to go, then I support you in that journey, and I wish you the best of everything. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. 3 years later, after my colleagues had said to me, "You said no to Ed Bacon?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "The great Ed Bacon?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Oh my God, he's never going to call you again." And I said, "Well, what can I say?" And he did. He called me 3 years later, almost to the day. And when he called me, he said, Marin called first, and she said, "Hi, this is Marin." And I said, "Hi, how are you?" She said, "You remember me?" And I said, "Of course. Nobody has a name like Marin." So we talked for a few minutes, and she said, "I have Ed on the other line, and he would like to talk to you." And I said, "Sure." Now, one of my colleagues from seminary had already said to me that he had applied for a position at All Saints, and he said, would you be a reference for me? And I said, "Of course I'll be a reference for you." And I assumed Ed was calling me for a reference. So when he said, "How are things going?" I said, "Fantastic," and they were. And he said, "So fantastic that you would not consider a position at All Saints?" Well, I almost dropped the phone. And I said, "Tell me what the position is." Well, Ed just continued to talk. And I said, "Ed, could you please tell me what the position is?" Well, he continued to talk. And finally I said, "What is the job?" And he said, "Senior Associate for Pastoral Care." Now, again, God goes before me, because I had just walked out of Brian's office. And one of the things that Brian said, he had just returned from doing sabbatical. He said, what do you think what would you like for your area to be, your area of focus to be? And I said, Brian, I get the sense I have a strong leaning toward pastoral care. And he said, okay, then what we would do is this. We'll send you to Hood, which was the local seminary. He said, and you can do some more studying at Hood. He said, and then we'll make sure that you can focus on pastoral care. So when Ed said, Senior Associate for Pastoral Care, again, I almost dropped the phone. I couldn't believe it. And I said to him, yes, I think I'd be interested. I said, I promised St. Patrick's I would be with them no less than 2 years, no more than 3, and I'm approaching my 3rd year. I came first I was on my way out here for something else, and I thought Pasadena was like, 10 minutes away. I was in La Jolla. And when Ed said, is it possible for you to come for an interview? I said, sure. Let me just see what I can do. And it was like, oh my God, I have to take a plane. So we realized that I couldn't get here in 10 minutes. And we did a telephone interview. And I did the telephone interview, and when I was done with the telephone interview, I said, well, you'll get back to me? And he said, yes. So he called me back that same evening, and he said, we would like to personally interview you. I said, okay. So when I came for the interview, I was blown away by All Saints. Blown away. Blown away by the community, blown away by the music, blown away by the way that you interacted with each other, the love you appeared to have for each other. And I thought to myself, this is a pretty interesting community, and one that I think I may like to be a part of, but I need to see some other things. And I was interviewed by all of the ministries in pastoral care at that time. We have many more now. What can I say? So and it was amazing to me because I'll remember a face, but I don't always remember a name. And I remembered everybody's name. I mean, unusual names. I even remembered the dog's name. And the owners of those dogs were blown away by that. They were like, oh my God, you remember our dog's name? I was like, well, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, but I do. Well, after I returned, on my way home, I got a call from Brian. He said, what do you think? I said, Brian, I really like this community. He said, will you take the position if they offer it to you? I said, absolutely. So I return home to North Carolina. Ed calls me and he says, we would like to offer you the position of Senior Associate for Pastoral Care. He says, so you'll be in charge of our Pastoral Care program. And I said, fine. And we negotiated a starting date. So I come here for your Pastoral Care program and realize that you don't have one. And I say to Ed, you lied to me. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you don't have a pastoral care program, which you have as a black hole, but we will have a pastoral care program. And we do. I know that there are many people here today who are part of pastoral care, and I just want you to do something for me. If you belong to any of the ministries in pastoral care, just stand up, please. And stay standing. Now, what you're seeing are members of our lay counseling ministry, our lay visitation ministry, our prayer ministry, and in the lay counseling ministry, we have therapists and lay counselors. You're seeing members of our prayer ministry, and what they do is they write notes to people to let them know that we're praying for them. But in addition to that, they call on the weekends and just say, listen, we got your prayer requests. We want you to know that we're praying for you. So there's so many amazing ministries in pastoral care that could not be if it were not for the people that you just saw standing. You know, I represent pastoral care, but I am not pastoral care. Pastoral care are those volunteers who are day in, day out, do the work that they do to make sure that you get what you need. And I think it's so beautiful. And I love it. I love doing what I do because of them and because of you. We have tried many, many things in pastoral care. Some of them have been good, some of them not so good. And what we do is we just keep climbing. We keep climbing. We don't stop. And at some point, we'll make this place the best pastoral care church in the country. I do want you to know that we right now are leading the nation in what we do in pastoral care. And we have a model that the nation, our national church, should copy. And I'm seriously thinking about finding a way to make that happen. Because I think that All Saints is the epitome of how a church should be when it comes to lay people serving lay people, because that's what it's all about. Volunteers helping volunteers, that's what it's all about. And I'm grateful that I landed here. But again, I think it was because God had already gone before me and cleared this path to bring me to this church. So thank you very much for listening to my story. Oh yes, one more thing. So I told you about my first husband that I left. And then I met my second husband, who was amazing. And I'm so grateful that he came into my life. He, too, was in North Carolina. And many of you may not know that he died. And he died before I came into the ministry. But before I came into the ministry, one of the things that we talked about was the possibility of my being a deacon. And he said to me, are you going to wear that white thing around your neck? I said, you mean a collar? He said, well, whatever it's called. I said, yes. He said, well, as long as you don't wear it to bed. And I thought, you are a trip. And he didn't live long enough to see me wear this white collar around my neck in his physical form. I know that he was with me on this journey, though, because I talked to him a lot. So thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So I promised Mike that I would open this up for questions. So any questions?
Zelda.
Hi.
Is this thing on? Y'all hear me? Okay, I've heard a lot of your story before, and I heard some more of it just now. And what I've been really curious about is what's up next for you?
Of course,
in
everyone wants to
retirement.
know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't get to that part of the story, did I? You see, it's because I'm having, well, I decided in 2011, believe it or not, that I was going to leave All Saints. And I decided in 2011 to leave All Saints because I thought that it was time for me to go. And then I went on vacation, I came back, and 2 of my colleagues had resigned. And Ed looked at me and he said, "You cannot leave." And I said, but I was first. He said, "You might have been first, but you cannot leave." So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll stay for another." Yeah. I said, "I'll stay for another 2 years." So I then, in 2013, said, "Okay, I'm going to be leaving in 2016. And then one morning, Ed got up into the pulpit and announced that he was going to be here 18 months long and that he was leaving, and I was furious. Because I had often said to him, "Shepherd, lead sheep. Sheep do not lead sheep. I'm sheep, you're shepherd. Sheep goes first." He obviously was not hearing it. So when he decided that he was going to leave, I said, "Okay, I will stay long enough for the new rector to come." And when Mike arrived, I almost changed my mind because I really enjoy working with him. However, what I know is that it is time for me to go. And it's time for Mike to bring in his people to help take us forward, to keep us climbing. And for me, my first month, I'm just going to sleep in. And because I work at All Saints, because I love what I do here, I will often forego self in order to make sure that many of you are taken care of. So I haven't been to the Grand Canyon. I haven't been to Yosemite. I haven't been to the Yellowstone or Glacier Park, or the redwood tree that I wanted to drive through is gone. So I can't drive through that tree, and I decided it's time for me to do those things. And I want to do them while I can walk and talk and see. So that is my next step. I told my daughter, who is not happy, that I'm going to stay here on the West Coast at least through the end of the year. And she was like, "But Mom, you told me you were coming home." I said, "I'm going to visit you." She was not happy, and she's okay. So I will be here through the end of the year so that I can get to see all of those amazing, creative places from God. So that's my next step. I will tell you that I do have other opportunities. However, I am never going to another church to be a rector or an assistant. That I can say. I had always made up my mind that once I left All Saints, that was it. I'm never going to another church. And you can take that to the bank. Okay.
Zelda, one of the things I love about you and appreciate you so much is that you have such a vast number of ways that you are open and hearing spiritually. And so I wonder if you would share with us some of your spiritual practices, or what gems you might leave with us in terms of spirituality and how to pursue that.
Thanks for asking that question. I am I think I'm very, very connected to the Spirit. When I talk about God going before me, that's my way of saying the Spirit was clearing the path. I meditate twice a day. I wake up in the morning and I meditate and pray. And I ask God to please, please lead me but most of all, to be with me, and most of all, to make sure that I'm listening and not running my mouth. So that's my meditation in the morning. And then at night, I reflect on the day through meditation, and I ask God to help me to see where I might have done things better, so that maybe the next day I can improve that. So spiritually, that's my practice. I love the water. I love the water. And one of the joys of being on the West Coast was being able to drive up the Pacific Coast Highway. And I will tell you, I think I may have taken longer than anyone to do that, because every time I saw something amazing with the water, I would just stop my car. And I actually waded in the Pacific Ocean. Now, you need to know that the Pacific Ocean is very different from the Atlantic, okay? The Atlantic goes like this. The Pacific goes like this. And when the waves were coming, I was like, oh my God, they're so powerful. But it was just an amazing experience. So every time I get an opportunity, I will go to the water. I'm a water child. I'm from the Bahamas. You know, we don't know anything but water. So I go to the water just to rejuvenate and to talk to God. We have interesting conversations. Now, when God begins to talk back to me, I'm going to be in trouble. But I do talk to God, and I listen. And the other thing about the spiritual journey is that God puts people in my path. And fortunately, I have the sense to pay attention. But it took me a while to understand that. Now I understand it. You know, age, you get wise. Yeah. Yes.
Bob Hunter. Thank you for being here, and thank you for exhibiting in your personal life your love for pastoral care. Two things. What area of pastoral care have you tried to do since you've been here but you weren't able to do? And do you know why? And secondly, what is left uncompleted that you hope someone else will carry on?
Thank you for asking that question. When I started in pastoral care, one of my realizations was that there was nothing about pastoral care that I had not experienced except the death of an adult child. So that when someone walked into my office to say, I have this crisis, or I have this issue, and I said to them, I know how you feel, I know how they felt, or I had a sense of how they felt, because I had had that experience. And again, that's God going before me. God put me in pastoral care because God said, you have had enough experiences in life to be able to relate to anyone walking into your space to ask you for help. So that's the beginning of it. The thing that I feel I did here that I was not able to do at other places was to say, I want other people to help me do this ministry. I can't do it alone. Can you imagine me doing counseling for all of the people that my lay counselors see on a routine and consistent basis? They do 10 free sessions with someone when they come to them. I don't have the time. So the thing that I'm able to do that I was not able to do is to bring people into the ministry with me and to walk with me on the journey, and then to be there for them when they needed me. And then what I'd like to see us do that I haven't had an opportunity to do, there are two things. The first is a prayer ministry that's 24/7, that anyone could call any time of day and get a voice on the phone, so that it's not a recording, and that if they needed someone to pray with them at that time, that would happen. Wouldn't that be amazing? You're in crisis, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you call the prayer line, and someone answers and says, All Saints prayer line, may I help you? Oh my God, that would be fantastic. That is something I'd like to see us do, and I wish that would be carried on. And then the other thing that I'd like to see us do in pastoral care that I wish would be carried on is that we expand. It's now pastoral care, healing, and health. I'd like to see us expand our healing and health ministry, where on Sunday mornings at the 7:30 service, in the same way that someone could go to the prayer rail and have you lay hands on them at the 9 and the 11:15, it could also be done at the 7:30 service. So those are the two things that I'd like to see us carry on.
Zelda, this is Justin, and I just want to say so much how I've enjoyed having you as our priest here. And thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being who you are, the strong African-American woman that you are. And so what I'm thinking about now is, how much you've meant to me personally, and seeing you up on the chancel as I'm in the choir looking out and seeing you preach, but most importantly, seeing you turn and face the choir and speak to us directly, and seeing your energy. And when Jimmy and I are up in the balcony, seeing you go like this. So that's it. I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Zelda, 9 years ago, I came to your office, and I was ready to give up. I had lost the love of my life, and I didn't think I'd be able to go on. And you saved me, and you have saved me every year since. I'll never forget how you went to a basket, and you got a prayer shawl, and you allowed me to select the one I wanted, and then you wrapped me in it. The only way you can hug, the only way anyone can hug, is the way you hug. You wrapped me and you held me and you said, "We are here for you and we are your family." And to this day, that's how I feel as an All Saints parishioner, and it's really due to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dorothy, thank you for reminding me of the prayer shawl ministry. That's another ministry that is a part of All Saints. And I will tell you that the second year, 2004, I had come here. Kip Pettit and Annalise Sullivan were the originators of that ministry. And they walked into my office one day and they said, "Would you adopt us?" And I looked at them and I said, "Nah, y'all are too old." and we laughed. And they said, "Well, tell me more about your ministry. We have shawls that we have knitted, and we would like to use them. We have so many, and we don't know what to do with them." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I'm on my way to Florida. My sister had died." And I said, but when I return, why don't we get together?" And they said, "Well, can we see you before you go?" And I said, "Sure." And then they left. And then I sat in my office and I thought, "Oh God, I sure hope these shawls are nice." So I was leaving that following week and they came to see me that Saturday and they brought this basket that I still have with the most beautiful shawls I have ever seen. And the reason why I wrap people in those shawls, and I'm going to get emotional, is because they wrapped me. And what they said to me was, when you go to be with your family to celebrate the life of your sister, we want you to know that you are being surrounded in prayer. And they wrapped me in a burgundy prayer shawl that I still have today. And I followed their example so that when someone comes into my office and receives a prayer shawl, I wrap them in it. I felt, most of you know, how many of you have received prayer shawls? Oh my God. Oh, fantastic. You know how magical they are. You wrap yourself in one of those prayer shawls and you feel the prayer. You feel the warmth. You feel all of the work that the women and men who now knit and crochet put into those shawls. And when Annalie died and Kip left, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought, I've got to this ministry has to continue. I just can't abandon this ministry. And a lady by the name of Tony Larson and ladies by the name of Tony Larson and Julia Taylor decided that they would come in and continue the ministry, and they're doing it to this day. And now I have men and women crocheting and knitting prayer shawls. And it's one of the joys of my ministry. I love giving away prayer shawls. I love wrapping people in prayer shawls. And I love reading the prayer to them that's a part of the prayer shawl. So thank you for reminding me.
Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Would you tell us, back the first time you met Ed, what was the question he asked you?
I don't remember.
Oh. Okay.
Let's see. When I first met Ed, there were several things about Ed. I had made up my mind that if Ed interviewed me in his collar, I was going to be not nice to him. And he didn't. Ed interviewed me. He had on a turtleneck shirt with, he came across, we were in Grand Central Station, and I was standing in that area where you could see most of Grand Central Station, and he was coming across skipping, really, across Grand Central Station. I thought, oh my God, he's not wearing his collar. Okay, that's one in his favor. And we went to lunch at, I can't remember the name of the hotel, but we went to lunch and we were talking, and he did say to me, he said, tell me about yourself. And I said, what is it that you'd like to know? And he said, well, I want to know about you. And I thought to myself, let's see, what do I want to say to this man? And I shared with him some of the things, about growing up in the Episcopal Church, about being a Bahamian, a little bit about my life. He didn't know a whole lot. I didn't share with him a whole lot. And then he said to me, I'm returning back to, he was doing a stewardship sermon at one of the churches in New York, and he said, and from there I'm returning back to Pasadena, and I'd like to send you some information about my church. And I thought to myself, your church? Because I was thinking it was God's church. And he said, and I'd like to send you some information. And he did. And one of the things that really, really surprised me was jazz vespers. I had never seen that at any Episcopal church. And he sent me a jazz vespers Eucharist along with your traditional Eucharist. So I guess the first thing he asked me was, tell me a little bit about yourself. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, Zelda.
Hi.
When I look around, first off, as everybody's saying, thank you so much for everything you've done for All Saints and for each of us individually. And when I look around the room and I see what a different place we are visibly than when you first arrived, and knowing your love and your focus has been pastoral care, but you've made such a difference in terms of bringing more and more people and increasing the inclusiveness of All Saints. Would you say a little bit about that journey?
Yes. When I first came, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me. So I would seek out faces like mine because I just needed to have that kind of sense of, okay, I got a sister over there, I got a brother over there. And as I continued on this journey, more and more people came. And people would say things like, when I walked into this church and saw you up on the chancel, I was shocked, but I came back. So I don't want to take credit for that. I want the Holy Spirit to get that credit. I feel that I am the tool, but I'm not taking credit for that. I will tell you this, though. As I continued my journey here, a group of black women came to me and said, we want a place where we could go and just talk and not have to worry about what we're saying, not being misunderstood. Is it possible? And I said, of course. And we formed a group called the Black Women Affinity Group. Now, that group has been so beneficial to me because when I walk into that room to be with them, I see people who look just like me, who if I said a certain word or did a certain movement, they would get it, wherein others would not. So I want to give credit to the Holy Spirit for what we have here at All Saints. And to all of you, it's not just me and the Spirit, it's all of you. You were open to receiving people. You've always been open. And when people walk through those doors, you're the first one to greet them with a welcome to All Saints. So I'm an instrument, but all of us are. And we've opened up our arms in a way that we need to, should, and I'm proud of. I will share this. I went to the ordination and consecration of Jennifer Baskerville. She is the new diocesan bishop of Indianapolis. And when I walked into that space, there were nothing but black female priests. And it was awesome. So we all got together and formed a line, and we started singing, "We are family. I got all my sisters with me," which was really cool. You can't do that often. But it was very, very nice. So yes, it was a great thing.
So are you open to a social media moment? I feel like we kind of run down. So I'm going to ask Zelda to go stand down there in the middle, and I'm going to ask all of you to stand in, and we're going to do one big fat social media picture. We're going to make it go viral. So stand right in the middle. Everybody squish in. Don't block Zelda, y'all. Step forward a little. One step up, Zelda. I love it, I love it. Come on in. Streamers, you can Photoshop yourself in later. We're close, we're tripping. All right. On the count of three, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, Zelda. 1, 2, 3, Zelda! Yay!
So Susan just reminded me that you're all invited to my party. It's going to be the evening of June 25th, 2 Sundays. Oh my God, 2 Sundays. Oh, wow. And I'm going to do the Jazz Vespers homily that night. And immediately following the homily, we are going to party. Okay? Yeah. So please come and dance along with me, because it's going to be a dance party.